Oh, I missed that.
The shot and he just right over it. Yeah.
Hello, folks. So I think we're already joined by 3 folks on Facebook at this point. So I guess we'll go ahead and start our presentation for today. Again, I want to introduce you to, I'm going to get your last name wrong, Molly? Okay, Stephanie Molly from Barker Funeral Home, just up the road in Carleton Place. Just a little bit of background. Again, I know as you're aware, a lot of the speakers that we bring in here aren't really necessarily focused on FASD. It's just on recognizing what life in general is like for our community, our culture, and all of that. One of the conversations that we were having is, as you know, all of us at some point will likely be involved from an executor standpoint for our parents. I've certainly been in that situation already. We also know, however, that in most cases our children are not going to be able to serve as executors for us. So that's one of those details that you don't necessarily think about, but it's one that I know with our relationship with Barker Funeral Home, I won't go into the details, but we've Barker Funeral Home has been a very huge part of our life, and a lot of times I don't think people recognize all the different services and things that they provide. It's much, much, much more than going to the graveyard, I guess. So Stephanie's here to kind of present a little bit. She will be sticking around afterwards to answer any questions as well.
Can you just make mention Barker's is the organization that sponsored? Thank you.
And then, thank you. And then finally, yes. We always want to make sure we mention our financial sponsors. So, and just on that note, it's important to recognize Barker Funeral Home was actually the very first financial sponsor that we had in relation to the trip that we're taking to Queen's Park next month. And it was through their seed money and funding that we were then able to parlay that out into our other financial sponsors. So, yeah. Huge, huge partner for us. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you to Rob for inviting me to speak. So my name is Stephanie Mully. I am a licensed funeral pre-planner at Barker Funeral Home in Carleton Place. Part of my job as a pre-planner is that I meet with families, I meet with individuals who want to get their affairs in order. So they want to put a plan in place, so that their family doesn't have to, so that they don't have to worry about it. So I'm hoping today I can give you some insight, give you some education that for yourselves, and that you can share with loved ones or friends that need be. So this is our building here. So you may be familiar with our facilities, and there's probably some familiar faces there. John Bowes, Wayne Bennett, co-owners, my colleague Carmen Crump, Brandy Mallison, and of course yours truly in the middle there. So I want to start off by asking you a question. And I think it's a good question because it relates to all of us. So if you can take a minute and ask yourself this question. What would I like my funeral to look like? So maybe you're thinking cremation, burial, maybe you want to have a visiting and or a service. Now, sometimes I meet with people who know exactly what they want. And sometimes I meet with people who aren't so sure or have no idea at all. Now, when you ask yourself that question, which one are you? Did you know exactly what you wanted? And if so, that's great. But does anybody else know? Or is it all up here? So by pre-planning, we can record all of your information in a file. So there's never any question. Now, on the other hand, maybe you're not so sure, or maybe you have no idea. All the more reason to pre-plan, because if you don't know, how is your family going to know? So we're going to go through some different options today. But as a pre-planner, we're here to meet with you. We're here to go through your different options to, figure out what is best for you. So I hear a lot of people say, I just want something simple. And simple is absolutely okay, except that what simple to one person might mean something different to another. So it's very important that your family, that your loved ones know exactly what you mean. So there are many different options with funerals. And as you probably know, cremation has come a long way. It's about 90% of the services that we do. Now we still do traditional burials, they just don't seem to be as common as they used to be. And there is no right or wrong way in choosing cremation or burial. It really is a personal choice. So different options that you can do. So a visiting, sometimes people refer to that as a wake. So you can actually do a private family visiting where it's just your family if you don't want it open to the public. And then you can actually have it open to the public as well. You can actually do both. You can actually maybe have an hour of visiting just for your family and then an hour of visiting that is open to the public. So different options there, as well as a service. So if you decide to have a service, where would you like your service to be? Perhaps it's in our chapel at Barker Funeral Home. Perhaps it's at a church. Also, you can also choose who you want to officiate your service. So if you have a certain clergy member that you want, we can definitely organize that for you, whether it's at our chapel or whether it's at a different church, and we can take care of all of that for you. Reception or celebration of life is also an option. And usually with the reception, it can be at our facility at Barker Funeral Home. We have a beautiful reception facility, but sometimes families choose to go elsewhere. So maybe a favorite restaurant or your local Legion. So it really is a personal choice and what is best suited for the family. So something I do want to mention that sometimes I meet with families and they say, we don't want anything. We just want to be cremated. We don't want a visiting. We don't want a service. Just give our urn back to our family and that's all we want. And that's completely fine, except there's a couple things to consider. Number one, your family, your friends, they want to support you and they want to pay their respects to you. They also need closure. Number two, if you decide to not have anything at all, no celebration, no visiting, no service, your family will constantly be asked about it. So whether it's at the grocery store, Home Depot, a restaurant, anyone that knows you and their family, they're going to come up to you and they're desperately going to want to give their condolences. So by having something, it gives everyone a place where they can come together and they could, tell your story. And, it is something that I find is it's something the family and friends need. So something just to consider. So personal details. So one of the benefits of pre-planning is that you can actually have your say. You can actually put your personal details into that. So you can actually choose your urn. And, there's so many different urns to choose from. There's different materials, marble, brass. Sometimes we even have families that use something from home, whether it's a jewelry box, a sewing basket, a teapot. And it really does have that personal detail to it. There's also cremation jewelry, so like what I'm wearing today, which tends to be pretty common. I know it's not for everybody, but I find with this one, you can actually, it can have cremated remains in it, and it's somewhere that you can keep close to your heart. And again, it's not for everybody, but it's definitely an option. Caskets. So many different caskets to choose from. Wood, steel, but again, everyone is different, different finish, different kinds of wood. So that's definitely something that you can pick. So for my arrangements, I have chosen a casket with a pink interior because I love pink. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that is what's representing me. Pallbearers. So if you decide to have a casket present, you can actually choose who you want your pallbearers to be. And I think this is a great thing because then you can have that discussion with them. And it brings the discussion about what your wishes are. Honorary pallbearers. So if you're not familiar with that term, honorary pallbearers are perhaps family members that want to take part in the ceremony, but maybe a child perhaps where they can't carry the casket, but they can actually have their hand on the casket or walk in front or behind the casket. And the same goes with an urn as well. Flowers. So does anybody have a favorite type of flower? Maybe roses, daisies? Why not have that at your funeral? Incorporate it. Newspaper notices. So you do not legally have to have a newspaper notice. So at Barker Funeral Home, with the family's permission, we will put it on our website. We also help with writing an obituary. I actually have families that write their own obituaries, and we keep it in the file for them. They also will have a picture that they want, and that's really them having their say in what they want. So typically the most newspaper that we deal with is the Ottawa Citizen and the EMC, but that doesn't mean that we can't help with any other newspapers. So perhaps you grew up in Calgary and you want it to be in the Calgary newspaper, we can definitely do that for you. Catering. So usually at a reception or a celebration of life, there usually is catering. And we have a great caterer that we use, but you are also welcome to bring in your own caterer or bring in your own food as well. And I think this is a place where, again, you can add that personal touch to it. I have a colleague who loves cheesecake, and she loves cheesecake so much that she wants to have a cheesecake toast, which is great. And for instance, for myself, I have a little bit of a sweet tooth, and so I want to have a candy bar. And I want a sign that says Steph's Sweets above it, because I want to share that, and I think that's important. Music. Does anybody have a favorite song? Maybe Amazing Grace, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. So why not? Why not have that as part of your ceremony? So maybe you'll have an organist that you want to play with certain hymns, or again, certain songs. Maybe you have family members that are very musically inclined, and they can play the guitar. Maybe it's bagpipes that you want to be played. So lots of different things that you can add to. Again, if there's any readings, if there's any poems, lyrics that you want read, it really is about sharing your story. And we all have a story to share. I kind of look at funerals like fingerprints, because all of us are unique, all funerals are unique, just like our fingerprints. So we had a lady pass away recently, Gloria, and Gloria was a quilter. She loved to quilt. So for her visiting, we actually had her favorite quilt placed on her casket, and then around the room we had all her quilts laid out, so that when you walked into that room, it wasn't just any room. This was about Gloria, and you knew that when you walked in. We had a gentleman by the name of Peter last year, and he was an avid fisherman. And so for his funeral, we actually had all his fishing lures lined up around his urn, and then all his prized fishing lures on the table, so that you knew when you walked into that this is Peter's story. So there's no question about that. So in your packages, I'm not sure if all of you have a package, but there is this planning guide. So on the very first page of this planning guide, this is actually all of the information that we need to start a file for you. So things like full name, birthplace, parents' names, and their birthplaces. Now, I meet with a lot of adult children who are pre-planning for their parents, and one of the things I'll say to them is, okay, well, what's your mom's and dad's name? And they'll kind of look at me a little blank-eyed and be like, that's Granny and Grandpa Smith. And I'm like, they'll look at me a little bit more concerned when I say, okay, well, where was Granny and Grandpa Smith born? Now, can you imagine having to try to find out this information at what could be the worst day of your lives? So by already having this information in place, it really does help your family. And so one of the things that I do when I meet with a family is we sit down, we talk, and I get a good understanding of what exactly your wishes are. And I write them down, I take down all of this information, And I also give a quote as well, and that's to give you an idea as far as cost goes. There is actually the option where you can prepay for your funeral. It doesn't have to be, but basically if you decide that you want to prepay for your funeral, it's cost guaranteed, which means that no matter when the death takes place, you, your family, your estate will never pay more for those services. Now, should you decide that you don't want to prepay, and that's completely fine, we still keep all of your information in a file. It's what we call a non-funded file. So all of your information is still there, all of your wishes, it's just that it's going to be paid for at the time and the cost at the time. So still really helping your family. So I have another question to ask you. I'm really making you guys think this morning. Who will be making my funeral arrangements? And the second part of this question is, do they know they will be making your funeral arrangements? So maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's an adult child, a brother or sister, another family member, a friend, a lawyer. I should have asked before this, does anyone have a will in place? Perfect, good. It is very, very important to have a will. And not necessarily just for funeral arrangements, but for everything outside of that as well. So whether it's banking, whether it's any other...
Power of attorneys.
Yeah, so that's actually my next slide. So just going to read the definition of executor here. So your executor is the person you choose to handle your estate after you die. This position carries a great deal of legal accountability. The executor is responsible for the signing and authorization of all legal documents and service details. We strongly advise you to have a will. Without a will, settling one's personal affairs may result in overwhelming personal, administrative, and financial charges. So there's a lot of confusion with executor and power of attorney. And I'm just going to make a disclaimer here. I am not a lawyer, and I'm not a counselor. But with power of attorney, so there's two. There is one for property, and there is one for personal care. And that is while somebody is living. Once someone has deceased, that is no longer valid, and it is the will and the executor. So there is a lot of confusion about that. So I just want to share a story. So a few years ago, I met with a lady by the name of Linda, and she was very concerned. She shared with me that she was practicing a different religion than her husband, and she was worried that her husband wasn't going to respect her wishes, and she wanted her daughter to make her final arrangements. And so I said, okay, well, Linda, who do you have as your executor? And she's like, oh, it's my husband. And I said, okay, well, you may want to maybe update that so that it is your daughter, because it is actually your executor that has to make those decisions. So a funeral director has to follow the executor and what they say. So if you want someone to be making your final arrangements, make sure that they know what
Unless
you
you've
want.
got the pre-plan. Like if you've got the pre-plan,
So-
they have to follow the pre-plan, right?
They do, but the executor can actually change it.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's why it's really important to have that talk with who your executor is going to be, and say, you know what, this is what my wishes are, this is what I have pre-planned. And in most cases they do, but they can make that change. So it is very important. So a service that, I just want to touch on this. So this is a service that we offer. Not all funeral homes offer this, but it's what we call post-service care. And this is where when a loved one passes away, we meet with the family after, and we actually take care of notifying the government agencies. So things like CPP, old age security, social insurance, health card, the death benefit. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it's $2,500, so we help fill out the application, as well as a survivor pension. So that is for a spouse of the deceased, or children under the age of 18, or children between the ages of 18 and 25 that are in school. So we actually help with filling out that application, as well as passport. So we actually go through a 2-page checklist with the family. And so we go through all the government stuff, but anything that we can't do, so because of of privacy issues, they don't necessarily always talk to us. So things like life insurance or driver's license or baking, we actually guide you as to where you need to go and go through that checklist with you. So it's a very valuable service, we think, because it can be so overwhelming when a loved one passes away, and there's things that you don't even necessarily think about that you need to do. So just to wrap everything up, just why pre-plan? So peace of mind, I think, is the most important. Can you imagine not having to worry about your funeral, your family not having to worry about your funeral because you have already put a plan in place? Have your say and pre-plan your way. So funeral arrangements are a deeply personal choice, and by pre-planning, you can actually ensure that it will be done to your lifestyle, your taste, your budget, your standards. We have had families where you say mom passes away and there's 3 and 4 children and adult children, and we're going through the arrangements and they're like, we never talked about this. We never talked about death. We never talked about what their wishes are. And one of them says, mom wanted cremation, and the other one says, no, mom wanted burial. And it can make a really difficult situation even more difficult. And something else that I find is that because it was never talked about, because the family's not aware of the wishes, is something that we call guilty overspending. And that's where they say, well, you know what, mom deserves the very best. We're going to get her the very best casket, or we're going to get her the very best urn. Whereas realistically, that's not what mom really wanted. So again, something I hear often is when there's no arrangements made or anything like that, is that after a service takes place, is the family will say, well, I really hope I did what mom wanted. So by pre-planning, there's never any question about that. And lastly, lower cost. So I mentioned about where you can prepay for your funeral, and again, it's cost guaranteed, and that does, they say with costs rising and everything like that, it can be really helpful. So not only are you relieving that emotional burden placed on your family, but it's also the financial burden as well. So together, we can build your future plan so that your family doesn't have to. So I just want to leave off on just one last note, and this is some advice that I got, and it was from dinner last night when we went out for Chinese. And the smart thing is to prepare for the unexpected. And I actually already tried those lotto numbers and they didn't work. So, is there any questions?
I just want to say that the reason Rob and I thought this might be a good topic is because we've had some unexpected losses, and that weren't pre-planned. And then when we look at both our parents, our moms, probably realistically won't be there to do it. Both my siblings and his sibling wouldn't do it. They just like,
They don't want to talk about it. They don't.
that's scary stuff. And my kids won't have the capacity to do it. So, we figured other people might be in that same situation as us, and so it's just one of those more things, like just like the DTC, just like all those other things. It's one of those things that we really, as families with people with disabilities, we have to think of, what are we going to do? So that's kind of why we asked you to come. And I know my mom is pre-planned,
Good.
and I'm like, exactly what she wants.
Well, that's
My
just
brothers
it.
don't have to deal with it.
Well, and it is. There's so many decisions to be made, and when a death has taken place of a loved one, and you're not in necessarily the right state of mind to be making all those decisions and picking what casket and picking what urn. So it really is. It is a topic that people don't even want to think about, let alone talk about. But we really do need to have that conversation.
Is there typically at your funeral home or any other, is there a cost associated with doing the pre-planning, like to sit down and go through that?
No, not usually. Definitely not with us. So we, I meet with families all the time, and even if it's just to get options or just a cost or anything like that, there's absolutely no cost to do that.
one of the things you mentioned too, I just wanna, just from personal experience, I've had a situation where, the loved one who died, the funeral home did not provide that post service, and I've had one where they did provide the post service. If you're looking at a funeral home, get the post service, cause it's a nightmare to deal with, especially when you're in grief, right? So that's, you know, one of the things I strongly recommend too, is looking at funeral homes that have post service.
Because we actually take care of, we actually take care of sending the forms. We send it with a proof of death certificate. We take care of mailing it for you and everything, so, yeah.
I didn't have to do anything when my mom did. I just said that they take care of it, and I get all that stuff. I was looking at them going, well, I didn't do any of that.
Yeah.
Yes, they did it all.
I think one other thing to mention as well, I know you were mentioning within the presentation, especially around the survivor's pension and so on. I could be wrong on this, but I know you were referring to the fact that survivor's pension refers to spouses, children under 18, children that are 18 to 25 within school.
Yes.
But I think there's also a bit of a caveat in there in terms of if there's dependent adult children.
Yes.
That's
Yes, I
part
think
of
there
that as
is
well.
something, yeah.
Yeah, and I know.
I think it was a separate,
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and that's one that we would want to be mindful of too, in terms of even within that pre-planning with your funeral home and so on. That's not one that normally we think about and comes up. Would definitely be
Everybody knows what a
one.
survivor's pension is?
I found this really helpful, and I'm one of those people who, and it's funny because I'm a social worker, so I should, but I'm one of those ones that, we don't want to talk about this. So I found this really helpful, and I found this helpful as well. The one piece that I would maybe point out for the next printing of this is, it says fathers and mothers, and some of our kids have 2 moms or 2 dads, and so at a time when they're trying to either pre-plan or plan a funeral, they don't want to have to deal with having to explain the family situation, so this can be limiting for some families.
okay, yeah, no, that's a good point, thank you. Also, just in the booklet, since we're talking about it, if you go to the back of it, there's actually a place where you can put all of your account information, so passwords. You know, I know sometimes with families, you know, they're looking for the stuff, they're going through drawers. This actually gives you a place where you can put it all in one place.
Caveat of the modern funeral, like the passwords and the.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is a nightmare when you don't have them. There's gotta be a lot of red tape to get around, to get access to those accounts.
Yeah, I know lots of families will have to, you know, if it's a Facebook or if it's Instagram, they have to actually email them and talk to them and explain. And, yeah.
Do we have any other questions at this point? Do we have any other questions at this point?
I've been through this.
Well, thank you.
It's a hard topic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we will take a 10-15 minute break and so on, I think, at this point. If we've got a few snacks and folks just want to hang out for a little bit, and then we will transition into our sharing time following that. Thank you very much for joining us, folks.